to you. Okay.
Cool.
Welcome, and yeah, excited to hear what you have to share with us today.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is really sweet because it really allows, me to talk about things I know, but to work with people like you, it's a special, way to offer that. And it's a conversation more as far as health goes, all the things that you teach and you offer. Like I said, just thank you for being you and offering that to the world. So with that, I want to just start by saying, being an Ayurvedic doctor has been quite an adventure. I'm not Indian, as you can tell. I have no lineage in that way, but I'm fascinated with the idea of what Ayurveda actually is. And so it wasn't like my journey was destined to become Ayurvedic doctor. It was a whole lot of what do I do here? How do I see healthcare? I started, modern medicine down that path of pre-med. I got a little disenchanted by that, just with the sheer fact that it wasn't the medicine that I hoped for, or that the idea of what that would do for people wasn't sitting with me. So long story short, I spent a lot of time wondering what was happening, and then I found Ayurvedic medicine. It just happened to be up the road from where my other school was in California. So I ended up for 6 years in Northern California, learning Ayurveda from the California College of Ayurvedic Medicine. I learned all sorts of things. Ayurveda is defined science of life. So there's so many different pillars. There's so many different aspects of life and health. But really, to put it all together has been quite a journey. And it's quite fun. There's so much to see and hear from that. So today, really what I want to talk about is we learn different avenues of what the deeper understanding of Ayurveda, but also, how do we look at health for people in a way that is real, is manageable, and is on even par with where we are as humans, right? I think medicine sometimes gets totally put on this pedestal, especially the allopathic model, and that's just it very much takes the accessibility away from people. And health, we've always been taught as Ayurvedic doctors, you are your best doctor. We're just here to support the path and offer some insight, and that really then applies to healthcare from within. When we look at Ayurveda, that's really what we talk about. So today, the fun part is we get to talk about the best things in the world. Ayurveda has a saying that the 3 pillars of life are balanced, you are balanced. And those 3 pillars, food, sleep, and sex. And it's so fun to be able to talk about that, and we can all hee about sex, but it's not the act itself. It's actually the energetic response to us living in vitality, living with our heart and our minds and our bodies all lined up. It's the culmination of all of these pillars. So without either of 3 of these pillars, think about it like as a tripod on a stool. Basically, if one is out of balance, the other 2 can't function properly. So when we talk about this, we talk about how important it is to balance these 3 areas in our body. And then we allow things to settle, balance out, and we become more stable in harmony with our health. So first off, we can start with food. And feel free, Vasi, jump in with questions, anything we need to slow me down. I talk really fast because there's so much information that I just am like, you need to hear this and this and this, but really it's the excitement of, making sure that all of this gets out, because I think that it's really important for people to understand that they can take care of themselves so well if they just have a few tools, a few intuitions, and really, understand what that means inside of them. So, from there, that's where I want to begin. Cool. All right. So first off, food. Food is life. We can't live without food, right? I don't know what the scales are these days, but people talk about 21 days without food, 32 days. I don't know what the answer is. But if you don't have food, you are not a human on this planet. We must ingest food. The question is, what are the right foods for the right person, for the right time, for the right season, for the right everything, right? There's a huge broad question of what is good food and how is good food good for me? Those are so important to Ayurveda because there's not a one size fits all answer. You know, we talk deeply in Ayurvedic medicine about a right food for right person at right situation. And that doesn't mean that, you know, if we're eating great kale on the, you know, homegrown ranch, if you're doing that in the wrong pretense and you're doing that with the wrong situation, it's not necessarily a good food, you know? I think that the world now is talking about so much of superfoods and things like, oh, we should just all eat goji berries. Well, yeah, goji berries are good for you, but they're also not, they're not something you can live off of. They're not something that will offer you sustainability, will offer your body resilience in all aspects. There's parts and pieces to each food system that is really important to our bodies. And knowing our personal approach to food, our personal relationship with food, and also, you know, what foods are right during time of year. You know, you can think about it like in a natural way. You know, if you're sitting in the dead of winter and it's blizzarding outside, are you out like making ice cream on the deck? And is that sustainable? And does that actually taste good? I don't know. I mean, for the right person, maybe, but also if your body isn't in a place with its microbes, with its ability to digest, any sort of thickness there that would make eating ice cream in January on the deck appropriate, right? And so we have to kind of feel into that. A lot of times what we look at is good for you foods and bad for you foods. And I take a step back from that. It's not about foods having good or bad qualities. It's about what qualities in my personal, you know, world are working with this food or not working with this food. And that changes the game. When we take it and put it on a more individual approach, looking at food then doesn't become good or bad. It's a conversation of what's right during what you need at the right time, those type of things, you know. So it's really important to understand that. And it happens in, you know, even in the animal kingdom. We have totally different microbes that come up at different times in our lives, different times in the season. So take a deer, for instance. This is actually the funnest study. You know, deer eat leaves and grass and things all through the summertime to sustain their bodies, to provide nourishment, to do that. When they come into wintertime, there is no leaves, there is no grass. So their bodies actually change their microbiome to accept bark, to accept roughage, to accept some of the most like, you know, non-appealing thoughts of there to survive through the winter. And their body actually relies on that. So if you went and fed them different types of fresh grasses, of things like that, they will have digestive imbalance, and they can lead to a really big problem. A lot of disease conditions and things, you know, of wild animals, deer and elk, can get really fouled up when they spend the winters in hay fields, in alfalfa fields, because it's not natural for them to have that quantity. They're looking for, you know, it's scarcity out there. But when they have too much, if someone's feeding them and they're feeding food, you can go really wrong. So transferring that into people, you know, food is an essential pillar of life because it does give us energy. I mean, food, you know, in its most broad universal form allows life to exist. It takes all the good things out of food that we input. Our bodies are such amazing pathways of transference of energy, of vitamins, minerals, of bugs. I mean, you know, the bacterial levels, the viral loads, those are all like utilizing your food. So what you put in your body is very, very clear to what comes out of your body.
This is so interesting. I just want to reflect for a moment about some of the things you shared.
Totally.
Yeah, the microbiome of the deer, that's so interesting. I never really thought about that or considered that before.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was curious to hear your take or your thoughts about things like cravings, because that's obviously a big deal to people who
Yeah.
have like emotional eating, and that was kind of the base reason for why I started this group, because I found ways to really navigate my own cravings, and there are foods I need to just stay away from, like processed flour, processed sugar, dairy, like things that are really addictive is what I call it for me. Like I feel best when I stay away from them. But I find that when I'm eating like lower blood sugar affecting foods, like if I'm eating a lot of vegetables, I'll start craving like bananas and I'll be like, I want 4 bananas. Or, so
It
just, yeah, your thoughts about cravings and like the foods that we feel like, oh, I really like, I need to have this or I want to have this.
Right. Yeah. And really cravings are just, they're a fantastic way of feeling into the intuitive side of what our body needs. And so in the modern food system, the processed sugars and the processed carbohydrates, when we have a deep desire for those type of cravings, it's usually because one, you do need them, but two, it's not the easy answer to go grab some bread off the shelf or go, eat a giant bowl of cereal, right? That doesn't actually satisfy the craving, because underneath that need is, okay, one, my body's wanting glucose. Glucose is energy, but we can get that from multiple different avenues. But when we deplete parts of our bodies, there becomes not only a physical response, but an emotional response. And, we've heightened that in this society so much as far as putting emotional energy into food, because most of us have grown up with having an emotional response with food, whether it's good or bad or anything like that. It's about how we look at food and how it reflects in us. So if we grew up, being kind of shamed with food or utilizing it as comfort when there wasn't comfort from another space, we become in relationship with food. And we all have those, but that's in a more disturbing way, so we're feeding a hole that is insatiable because it's not the right input to feed the hole that's in, the heart is the way we look at it. So, emotional energetics of food, and you can feel it, you can watch it, kind of a fun experiment. When you see people in the summertime, it's really hot outside. It's really dry, in our country. And so a lot of times, it's the perfect moment to have a barbecue. Well, a lot of times people have a barbecue, they're grilling meat, and not just like a little bit of meat. Like it's like meat, nothing wrong with that, but set the stage for a really big hunk of protein, right? A lot of fat, probably not a lot of fiber or anything that goes with that. Maybe a beer, which is alcohol, which is very fiery. Maybe, some like offhanded potato salad. That balances a hair bit, but really what we've done is added fuel to our own fire, right? So what happens in a moment like that is, yeah, the food is there. It's still good food. There's nothing wrong with the food choices, but it's the time of season. It's the time of day. We're usually standing outside. It's really hot. We're just having hot on hot on hot. And so when we get done at the end of a day of barbecuing, people's emotions are a little hot. Our bodies are depleted. And it's mostly because we didn't apply our food sadhana to the essentially the situation and the environment around us. So when I say sadhana is a food guidelines, right? And those are really, really important. Most of our modern society doesn't sit down, enjoy a meal. We kind of wander around, we're snackers. We don't look at our food as like a plate of food. We can graze all day. We can run in the car when we're doing kid stuff. Like there's so many different ways we do that. But food sadhana realizes how important it is to have a very direct relationship with food, very present in what we're doing with our food. And then our food becomes utilized in our body so much better. And we've proven that with science, but we've known this for thousands of years. I mean, you eat a nice meal, you sit and let it digest for 5 minutes, you feel pretty great. If you're running around and you're popping in food and it's just kind of getting something in your mouth to go to the next thing, it does not digest. Yeah, isn't that fascinating to me? When people realize that there's not a option to blend. You either rest and digest, or you move your fight or flight. So you don't get to have oh, it'll digest later. Your body actually stops releasing enzymes, chemicals, HCl for digestion. So these food sadhana being able to hold rules, guidelines around eating is some of the most subtle ways, but some of the most powerful ways to understand the digestive process.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds like a really powerful and mindful way to relate with your food, the food sadhana.
Yeah.
And as you're talking, it makes me think of a we had a presenter come and talk about the nervous system, Galina Denzel, and
Yeah.
she actually works with people who have, a tough relationship with food, whether they restrict or whether they overdo it, but she helps them to really calm down their nervous system and really reflect on what's going to feel supportive to them when they're eating. And it sounds very similar to this concept of food sadhana, like what would really truly be nourishing to allow your body to just digest this food properly and not to be in fight or flight mode because you're moving in between one thing to the
Totally.
next.
Yeah. It's
Um,
fascinating to know how many different, it's not just an Ayurvedic gig, it's science to where we
mm,
really understand how important it is to allow food into our body, utilize food properly, which means break down in the digestive process. And the other part that most people, it's like, oh, we don't talk about it. It's the lower GI. How does elimination happen if you put in all this good food? Okay, it breaks down and then it gets utilized. Awesome. Then where does waste go? And nervous system stuff is so important on all of those situations. I mean, our entire system is designed to, oh, I might need to hold on to that if I'm in fear, if I'm in fight or flight, I might need to utilize that. And so our body naturally, even unconsciously, stores that if we are in a state of nervous system dysregulation to, you never know when you're going to need it, right? And isn't that just fascinating? And we talk about, struggles with weight and struggles with like, gosh, I know I'm eating healthy, but what's going on here? There's so much more than just calories in, calories out. I mean, I really want in the food world to dispel some of those myths because I think they're destructive. I think they're really hard on people. And it's not that easy. There's nothing easy about it. It's something that every person is different and they can utilize so many different ways in which to engage with food. You know what I mean?
mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I mean, food is such a broad category. It's, for each person's unique constitutional makeup. We talk about the doshas in Ayurveda. And when we understand the dosha, we understand one, if there is balance, okay, what do we eat in a balanced system? It's very different than what we eat in an imbalanced system. So if we have imbalance in one particular area or the other, there's a lot you can do with just food choices. We don't even need to get into food quantities, even how it's cooked, but proper food, proper time, proper need in the body. And you can get really lost in those weeds or understand the concept. And then it's like, how does that apply to me today? Very, very cool way to manage food.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing to me just how many different ways of food affects us in like anytime people are having any sort of health issues, if they change the kind of food choices they're making, it can change dramatically their health results in so many areas. I just want
Yeah.
to keep space for if anybody else, if Milena wanted to ask a question or share an insight as we're talking, anything about your relationship with food, um, or questions for Gwendolyn. Just
I
give.
am I'm very fascinated about all of this. I've started reading a book about Ayurveda recently and just getting to know my dosha and seasonal eating and things like that. So I am just fascinated by this conversation completely. No questions so far. Just thank you. Thank you for showing up, both of you, and talking and having this conversation.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. And really it's just the tip of the iceberg, I mean, there's books that just written about food science in Ayurveda and how we take in food and energetics. I mean, each food that we have or that we utilize in our body carries a set of energetics. It's not just, proteins, carbs, and fats, vitamins, minerals, all that good stuff. It actually carries a more subtle energy. I mean, you think about like, an easy way to look at it is you take a jalapeno right? So a jalapeno doesn't necessarily have to be really, really hot. What happens when it loses water, it becomes hotter, right? When you dry a chili, you take away the water, so you actually increase the heat. That kind of food science is fascinating because we understand the basis then of utilizing food then for our primary dosha, and know what foods may or may not be, helpful when we're trying to balance those doshas. So, that's probably a whole other conversation, but so fascinating. There's so much more to food than just, its constituents scientifically.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about your thoughts about like raw versus cooked food. There's a movement of people who are like, it's, raw is so much better because of the enzymes. And um, I do a mix of both because I like both, but it's an interesting argument that like you get more of the enzymes in raw food. But then there's also, some nutrients come out when you cook food. So what is your take on the whole raw cooked? And then probably pretty soon we should move into the next pillar.
Into the next one, sure. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that that's actually really interesting because there's food movements everywhere. I mean, you can just jump onto Google and find like, oh, you should eat nothing but like meat. Okay, wow, pull back. So really, the answer is it depends. And it's not a fun answer, but it's absolutely important to know that each person, each season will have things that their body can and will enjoy and utilize. And then there's times that they're not going to. So raw food is lovely. I mean, it comes straight from the ground. It's got, like you said, this base of nutrients. If our body has the ability to digest that food and utilize that food, it is brilliant. If our body does not have a digestive capacity enough to take on the strength that it takes to digest raw food versus cooked food, then we have another scenario, right? And so when we have unstable, we call it agni, but think about agni as just digestive capacity. If we don't have the ability, you're going to eat a raw salad with displaced agni, it's going to hurt. I mean, it won't digest. People talk about food in their stool and this and that, any sort of bloating. That means you don't have the digestive capacity to handle raw food at the moment. And is that good in the winter? It's different. Do we crave soup in the winter or do we crave salad? It depends. But same goes, on the other side. We don't give sick, recovering people raw carrots and onions and garlics and, really potent, pungent things. It would destroy their system as they're rebuilding it. So we have even protocol for bringing people back to health, knowing that we can pre-digest, which is what cooking really essentially is, into a place where your body can accept it. So right place, right time, right situation, right agni will determine, what food is appropriate for you. And that will change. It's not a linear game at time of year, time of life, time of your digestion. Eating early in the morning versus eating midday, late at night. Modern science talks about late at night eating. That's real. But if you don't have a good agni, that's going to be even more real for you.
Yeah. I wonder what tips you have for people to kind of reflect and know for themselves. And you shared a few of them of like if you have bloating or if you have digestive issues, then you know that that wasn't the right choice at the right time. How do you develop that? Like, how do you figure out, oh, was that good? Any
Right.
tips you have around that?
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really cool point. Food is more about the response to food. When we taste food is the first sign of digestive capacity. If you don't, start kind of drooling when you smell homemade cookies coming out of the oven, you don't have digestive fire to digest those cookies. Smell actually responds. You create enzymes in your mouth to digest the cookie, and then it hits, the stomach and goes from there. But knowing, what happens to your body, you can become intuitive with self. Those are actually like flags that your body's saying, hey, that didn't work out so good for me. Like, that bloating, that burning, indigestion, let's get to the bottom of it. Let's not just pop an antacid and hope it goes away, because that's the first sign, these little imbalances in the GI of a long-term chronic deeper condition, right? And I end up treating a lot of that. We look away from these small things that, you know, in the end, is it going to kill you? Not at the moment, no. But if you left to your own devices, I'm just taking an antacid and I have reflux every day. I know what that turns into. It turns into GERD. It turns into, you know, esophageal like ulcers. I mean, we can get really ugly in a long time. So paying attention to those really is one, knowing when to be like, I ate that and this is what happened. Okay, how do I then go from there? And most of that, you know, in a nutshell, there's very many nuances, but in a nutshell, we aren't having the digestive capacity. We need to increase capacity. And so finding that through food, mostly through spices. Spices are the ultimate digestives. And then past that, there's deeper ways. You know, we started looking at external applications, enzymes, and, you know, pancreatic secretions and all those that you can get into the deeper notions. But knowing first phase of disease is through the digestive response. That's a really, really cool way. And Ayurvedically, that's how we, you know, utilize preventative medicine to keep us healthy. Don't look away. If gas is becoming a daily occurrence and everything you eat is bloating you, is giving you gas, we dive into that. We find out why. And that's really the cool part. Don't let that be the stage that's set, because it turns into so much more later on.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. And it sounds like it's really important to just pay attention to your body. It sounds so basic. And
It's
yet
so,
so
yeah, and
many of
that's
us don't do it
we
really.
don't.
Oh, it's just a
No, and
little,
we just,
yeah,
it'll figure out, and sometimes it does, and that's okay too. You know, we don't want to
right.
over excite ourselves. Oh, I've had indigestions. It's like, nope, that's just your first warning signal. And yeah, sometimes you look away and everything works out just fine, but other times it keeps building and building. And really, Ayurveda is about building. We have, you know, the disease model is accumulation, aggravation, and then overload. And so accumulation can happen for a very long time, and you can stay in that set of accumulation. You aggravate it, it becomes uncomfortable, and hopefully you respond to that uncomfortable enough to get this figured out. And then overload, it manifests in other ways. And that's really the process that happens in any disease state. Subtly, accumulation. Let's look on that end and would not wait until overload to really have, you know, a deeper conversation about how to take care of yourself.
Mm. Yeah, this is such important information. And I feel like all of us can learn from this. Or a lot of people can. Maybe some people are perfect at really responding
I would love
in the moment. But yeah, so just watching the time, I think it's probably good to move on to the next pillar of sleep.
Yeah,
You ready?
is like you say sleep and everybody has opinions. And really, I think, you know, our modern world, I think every one of us has experienced bouts of sleeplessness, maybe not insomnia, but really, you know, when we wake up in the middle of the night, or when we can't go to bed and we just can't allow our body to relax or our mind to calm. Those places are, again, that same place. Let's pay attention to that. Let's not just, you know, take a pill. Let's not just turn away from it. Let's not just be, you know, tired and crabby in the morning. Let's really get to why are we not allowing sleep to enter us, right? Because it is an allowance on so many ways. Our ability to rest and digest, you know, that's the sympathetic, the parasympathetic nervous system. That drop down, that exhale in our body allows everything to settle into what's happening inside, right? And when we don't have enough of that in our lives, our modern worlds are kind of all over the place. You know, where's that bunny and this squirrel went this way, and we got a lot of things going on. But if we don't regroup, if we don't pull in the physical, the mental, emotional, and the spiritual just to draw into self, we don't allow space for sleep to engage with us, right? So we Ayurvedically, you know, we consider sleep a privilege when we've done things well. And it's really, you know, not to say, oh, you lived something bad today because you didn't sleep. No, something just isn't settled. And, we look at sleep as it's a complex process. It's not a one size fits all again. People say, oh, get your 8 hours of sleep. Well, I know from experience, and I know from, studies that doesn't work in every single body. Every single dosha has different responses to sleep. And I think fighting against the idea of, I just can't sleep, is actually the wrong approach. I feel like when we look at it as allowing sleep to enter us, allowing deep rest, we invite it in ourselves, not fight against it. It's a very it's a very complex thing, sleep, that whole thing of rest, right? And there is so much to that. When people come to me for sleep issues, if that's a big symptom or a big concern, usually we don't engage with the actual sleep approach, right? We've all heard of good sleep hygiene, and we know how to physically, drop ourselves down, keep rooms dark. I mean, blue screens, all the fun things that are, kind of the modern version. But yet sleep still, eludes us in a lot of ways. And what we need to get underneath in sleep is really, what are we not allowing sleep to enter? Why is that? Is it our minds too busy? Is it our bodies still have energy that need to be used up? I mean, there's many, many different ways that gets translated into, I don't sleep, right? How many times you wake up at night. So sleep, I always tell people, is a secondary response to a bigger imbalance, right? And so we pull back, we decide what physically is happening, what mentally, emotionally is happening for a lot of people. I think we sit with a whole lot of things in our minds. We don't have a lot of outlets or tools to help trying to drop that down. Not that you can just make stress go away, because stress is just this big fat elephant in the room kind of word, and it's so just ambiguous, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, we all carry stress, and some carry it differently than others, and knowing how to hold it, how to work with it, and then how to leave it be is really something that I don't think our culture gets a lot of. And rest and sleep are two very different things. So you can actually sleep, like deep sleep, very little. But if you know how to rest, if you know how to rest your body, if you know how to rest your mind, you can actually, be very, very well balanced, very well thriving on very little sleep. It's a pretty fascinating way to look at it. There's a lot of people in the world of sleep and science and education and studies. I mean, it's a big deal for us.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I guess two questions come up for me, and maybe I'll just say the first one now, and then we can I'll say both of them, and then you can kind of take them as you'd like. But you mentioned doshas and different needs for sleep. So I was curious if you could maybe share a little bit more about that, because some people may not know anything about doshas and how they might relate to sleep, how they might have different needs. And the other question is, how can we get that deep rest? So if somebody is listening and they are not able to get the sleep they need, how can they make sure they're resting at least to give themselves
find rest? Exactly. So doshically speaking, and that could be entire books and more conversations, but each individual has a way to their elemental base. We look at humans and kind of break them up into the elements, whether it's ether, air, fire, water, or earth, kind of similar to Chinese medicine. But when we establish our dosha, we understand what is predominant in our body, and people realize that. So if you're of fire, you have more of a fire kind of personality, you have different structural tendencies, you also have different manifestations. And so with sleep, a lot of times, we can go through an interview. So there's people that sleep. So I always ask, so can you fall asleep easily? Maybe. Do you wake up in the middle of the night? What time do you wake up in the middle of the night? So our circadian clocks are actually really tied. Ayurvedics knew so long ago that it's tied to the sun, that it's tied to the rhythms of of the time of days. And really, we look at a doshic clock very much as a biological clock, right? So when you say in the modern world, like we go to bed by 10, that's actually a pretty good thing. You know, the body calms down, it gets dark, we should be having melatonin released, you know, the allowance of rest to come up. If we can't go to sleep in that before that 10 o'clock hour, we actually have a natural kickback response. So if you're not resting and sleeping, you're, oh, I'm awake. They call, you know, people call it like the night owl or the second round of energy. Like if you've ever kept kids up past like bedtime, you can like, whoa, what happened to you? second rolling, you know, and it's very true in the circadian world. And so knowing, you know, how your biological clock is working, knowing that there is such an important time when rest happens for all the other things in the body to do its job. So digestion, but the cleaning out of the immune system, so many people that struggle with sleep actually have really low immunity because immune system only clears, drains, and rebuilds upon rest. And that's not sleep, but it's rest. And so when we have immune dysfunction, we first and foremost, like, how do you sleep? Let's figure this out, you know, and really come up with that. So times of night are different, really different applications of what is responsible or what dosha, what element is responsible for different sleep disturbances. So if you can't go to bed, there is a different dosha applied than if you're waking up in the middle of the night. Let's say that the 2 to 4 a.m., you know, a lot of us get to that place where we're like, yep, we're awake and we're just hanging out. And, you know, it's not that we can know, oh, this is coming up for me. It's like, why am I still awake? I'm tired and this and that. It's the body's driving that. The subconscious is driving that. A lot of sleep is the subconscious. When we are allowing the conscious mind to take a break in sleep or deep rest, the unconscious gets to equalize. And when we don't have that, or we don't give our bodies time for that, whether it's deep rest or whether it's sleep, we create a bigger dissension from each other, right? And so the equilibrium happens. That means immunity cleans house. That means all the stuff that all the goodness, the plaque, the juices, everything in our brains. If we turn the brains off, like when we sleep and rest, it drains all of that buildup. So non-sleepers don't get that opportunity. So the more that comes in and the buildup in the head, there's modern science studies about sleep associated with different, you know, neurological conditions like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, even autoimmune stuff, because it's so tied to that. So having an understanding of yourself in sleep, and then what is eluding sleep? Those are the factors that we really come back to of, okay, when do you wake up? How long do you stay? What do you do? Do you fight it? Do you sit with it? Do you take something for it? So many different avenues for people to find rest because it's a desperate situation. You know, you can, I mean, they use, you know, sleep deprivation as a torture device in most like cultures. If you want to mess with somebody's head, go ahead and make sure they don't go to bed. It's extraordinary. They're powerful, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give some space if anybody else had any questions or had anything to share as we go through our discussion. And okay, so what are some ways that people can get deep rest if they're not able to sleep? Like I have a friend who's just not, she can't get to sleep. She says, I've tried everything. I've tried doing all the sleep hygiene. I've tried dropping all the sleep hygiene, like nothing works. So
Yeah,
how can they get that deep rest?
Deep rest. Yeah, there's places in us, you know, when our body is pushing against that idea of calming, it usually has, you know, relevance to the nervous system. It also has relevance usually to really big stressors, and that just builds on itself. So, you know, in Ayurveda, there's this really wonderful practice called yoga nidra, and nidra is translated to sleep. And so, you know, the yoga world understands if you go to a modern yoga class, you're going to go, you know, do some asana, you're going to have this. And then at the end, they ask you to lie in Shavasana, right? And Shavasana is laying on the floor. It's very relaxed. Usually you have your eye covers, and it allows the body to absorb what you utilize. And so Shavasana has a place where it's the first layer of relaxation. And so we in modern times, what does it feel like to be truly relaxed? If you're sitting on the couch watching TV, you could be relaxed physically, you know, I mean, it feels kind of soft and gooey and you know, we're dropping it down, but if our mind is engaged, we are fully relaxed in the mind-body experience. And so creating a practice around knowing how to drop the body, drop the mind, and allow, you know, our energy to sit. That is just the basis of so much dropping of hormones, dropping of energy in the body. I mean, when we're vibrating at just a mile a minute, are we able to find quiet anywhere? The yoga nidra is a practice of allowing, and it's a pretty systematic way of getting there. You know, when I teach people, newbies of what yoga nidra is, we usually do a guided sort of meditation, really walking through the physical body so that you can know what tight feels like, and you can know what relaxed feels like. You can watch the breath. You can watch, you know, even your shoulders drop. When you take a big exhale, it's amazing to watch. Doesn't that all just come, you know, within? So that's a body response I ask people to pay attention to. Once we get that body relaxed, then we can work with the mind. It doesn't happen as easy if we haven't practiced how to do this simultaneously. So it's very structured in the beginning. Now our body is relaxed. So with our eyes closed and we're here in presence, what is coming up in our mind? Why is our mind racing? What are we externalizing when we need to actually be internalizing? A lot of times that's a very scary place for people because it's going so quickly and there's so much going on that I don't know. I don't even know what's coming up. I don't even, you know, and that part takes a lot of just patience and love and allowance more than anything to really dive into what is keeping your mind just going all the time, you know, and practicing that much like meditation. And you know, meditation in our modern world gets a pretty bad connotation, in my opinion, because you can have a meditative space and mind anywhere you go. But if you don't practice anything like that, how will you ever know? That's the part where practice is the only way you get anywhere. We practice, we move our physical bodies, that's exercise, right? It's good for us. How come we don't exercise our minds? How come we don't exercise our emotions and practice dropping them down? We certainly know how to raise them, but do we know how to drop them? Yeah, not so much, you know? So those are places that are very, yeah, I think they're very personal for a lot of people. I think they're very complex because that gets in the inner landscape of what we deal with in our stress, what we deal with in our hearts. And again, it's that conscious, subconscious equalization. You know, our mind can tell us a lot of things, and it tells us a lot of stories that may or may not be true. When this rises and that subconscious energy allows this to be like, okay, I can exhale. That then brings up all the other stirrings that are there, and we can let them go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so powerful, just giving the body and the mind time to relax. That's been a huge piece of my journey and my ability to finally lose weight after years and years of trying different things.
Yeah.
Meditating or visualizing every single morning and every single night, if I'm not too tired, just taking that time to deeply relax my nervous system, I think was huge. And also to plant seeds of what I want to create. That's really powerful. And I feel like it's a tool for anything you want to change in your life, really. Like,
It is. No, and I think that is so important to acknowledge. Again, it's that subtlety, you know, people are like, You mean a visualization is going to be better than Ambien? Yeah, yeah, I do, because Ambien will mask the blunt the effects of your nervous system. It will sedate the heck out of you. And yeah, I mean, you might find some sleep, but you are not going to find equalization. You are not going to find peacefulness in that. You're going to just mute it and start over tomorrow. And for, some, and I want to, I want to make sure I'm very clear. There is a time and a place where that is very important. When you are on the point of no return, when your body is so exhausted, your mind and your heart are so spent, it is really, really hard to come back from that. It is a form of insanity when you lose sleep, according to Vedics and natural medicine. And so, getting to that place, you lose ability for rational to take over. And that it feels very scary for a lot of people in a lot of situations, and it creates even more nervous system dysfunction. And so just those moments, and this isn't a practice where you have to spend an hour. I mean, we all look for more hours in the day. This is a 5-minute gig. This is a 10 minutes of just, what did I experience in the day? How does it work inside? And, can I leave it be? It'll be there again tomorrow. And be able to really befriend that idea and allow, as opposed to just push against it, trying to box ourselves into, oh, I can't think about that right now. Yeah, good luck with that. So I appreciate your experience of just sharing yours of, like you said, these little subtle keys are planting your seeds of what do you want in your life? How do you want your body to represent your mind and your heart? How does that come out? I think those are so important. Our belief systems are extraordinary, and they can be extraordinary good. They can be extraordinary, like, painful. And when we don't know how that lines up well or clear in us, we can create a lot of chaos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, I just want to make sure we have time for the last pillar. Anything you want to share on that
one, right?
topic?
Everybody wants to talk about that one. Yeah, no, it's actually the funnest, and really in Ayurveda, we call that term or that tool, and it's a group. It's not necessarily sex, like the act, but brahmacharya is the ability to navigate energetic response, right? So our sexual energy is the most powerful energy in our body. I mean, it is designed to procreate. It is designed to create movement. It is designed to, I mean, as moms, we are designed to lift cars off of babies if it becomes necessary. And so that energy is the sexual energy. It is the drive of life. It's what, it's the purposefulness of all this good food and this good sleep. It's the production of that. So when we talk about these pillars, how important is it to manage sexual energy? It's so great because the modern world sees sexual energy as, oh, I'm going to get on Tinder maybe and swipe tonight. That's not what we're talking about. It's like the interaction with all of our relationships. Every single time we interact with our partner or our friend or even an adversary, we are creating a sexual engagement. And that doesn't mean that the sex, like, it's like, oh, I want you, I'm attracted to you. It's like, when we are powerful beings, we are very potent. And that word is really important for people to understand how to utilize that, how to navigate it, watch it come up and ebb and flow in our body, and really why it's so depleted in us. We get to an end of the day, and in our modern, American lives, it's like, oh, honey, I'm too tired. Like, but okay, that's very true. But that, how much effort it requires to have a actual physical sexual engagement. Understand how much energy you utilize during the day to not have energy to have a sexual experience, like in intimacy with a partner. That is such a critical part of managing. If you use it all up during the day, or you use it all up during a season, you're not going to have any here. And so that affects, you know, our entire being, our energies, our offsprings, our circadian natures of life. Those get really, really misguided, let's say. So there's a sweet spot in the sexual energy world. Too little, bad things go on. Too much, bad things go on. And so finding that balance, again, it's also doshically related. Different body systems have different sexual energetic needs. And when we, you know, don't recognize that, you know, people say, oh, I have a really high libido. Well, maybe you're overstimulated and that seems to be a high libido. That's very true. But then there's also, if you're hanging out and not utilizing your physical energy, yeah, you're going to push that up in a way to where I have to get this out. That becomes very much a physical sexual nature. And the disturbance in that is really, I don't know, it's really complex in our society. And we have such a odd understanding of what that is in people from a primal sense. And then we disturb it culturally, you know, it's because some of it's around shame, some of it's around exploitation. So we have a lot of repressed and a lot of heightened sexual energy, and the balance somewhere in this world is different for each of us, different times of life. I mean, we burn our sexual nature, it's not there as much, you know, and so that's really important to understand how our energy we use and what we choose to utilize that nature, you know.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Do you have any tips about how people can like go through the day without depleting their energy? Because I think a lot of people have that experience, and not just for sex, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I don't have energy to make good decisions. So it's easier to overeat or eat bad foods, or I don't have energy to like play with my kids because I'm so depleted, whatever it is. I think
Oh,
navigating
it
energy
is.
is something a lot of people struggle with.
Totally. Yeah. And making time for balancing that. I mean, you think about like our modern American life. Like, I mean, we don't utilize energy, we use stimulants for coffee and for, getting up and rolling in the morning. I mean, you should have more energy in the morning. And so, utilizing a powerful sexual force is really important doshically when you actually choose to have sex. It's fascinating. Some doshas are very much like morning's the time because by the end of the day, they've used it up. But the overarching problem is that we don't manage expenditure and rest equally, right? So most of us, I mean, we're not resting during the day even at all. Sitting in front of this computer is not rest, it's actively engagement, and going and sitting on the couch at night and watching, a violent film or, yelling at your kids to like, get in the shower, it's time for bed. Like none of that is rest. When we have rest, it's the bubble of retraction of rest. So we take away all senses to provide deep rest that way. And that balances energy so much during the day. When people say, I just don't have the energy by the end of the day. And it's like, well, where have we depleted it is really a good question. And that comes from, did you eat well enough to sustain your energetic needs? And did you overutilize those and not allow any regroup kind of thing? And when we do just go from one activity to the next, you go from work and then you pick up kids and then you have activities and then repeat, it gets pretty like daunting. And when we don't even take 5 minutes, let alone 20 minutes to really there's a huge response in 3 seconds of what a little glimpse of rest looks like, but the ability to reboot that is extraordinary. And that's why, when people talk about what can I do? A 10-minute check-in with yourself and retract. There's a word called pratyahara, and it's called retraction of the senses. If you know how to tuck it in and really regroup, you can go on and on and on. Like I said, there's people that don't actually get deep sleep that are very functional because they know how to deeply rest. And so it's the rebalance during each moment of those days. You spend a whole bunch of energy doing this. Let's go ahead and regroup that a little, even at that moment, right after, later. I mean, everybody's got different schedules, circadian rhythms say different times, different approaches, right? But it's very much important to honor that. And our society of constantly go, 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 constant doing, it makes us feel like we're getting somewhere. That's a very masculine energy. It's a very doing energy. And when we actually look at the equal and opposite of that feminine, the letdown effect, that is very real. And if we don't find that, whether you're male or female is irrelevant, we all have masculine and feminine energy. Finding that within us and the ability to rest and relax, absorb and digest, as opposed to expend, expend, expend. It creates deficit that's ongoing for a very long time, you know, and people's sexual energy is very directed towards their disease condition. Too much, not enough. Somewhere we got to find the middle ground there for true harmony.
Yeah, definitely. This is really interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like just taking time for that to pull back your senses throughout the day can help you to navigate that energy better, or to meditate or do yoga nidra or prayer, whatever kind of pulls your senses and your energy back in. Taking time for that throughout the day can be
Yeah.
helpful. I find that if I just take a few deep breaths and just kind of notice what's going on around me, just for like 5 seconds, that feels restful, and I feel joy from that.
Isn't it great? I kind of look for those moments. Like I teach people in the breath work to really understand, you know, when you go and like hike a mountain or you do something pretty great with a whole lot of physical expenditure and you get to the end, you're running a race and you're like, wow. And you know that the tingling in your body is the best way to kind of share that. But the drop down of like, whoa, I just accomplished that. I mean, even planting a garden, like that's a big project physically. And then it drops, and that's that moment of, oh gosh, it's acceptance, but it's also the rebuild of this really cool term called ojas. In Ayurveda, the ojas bank is what we look at it as. It's a bank account. It's a bank account of your energy, your vitality, your immunity, all this. We call it the amrits of life, of things you need to not just survive, but to thrive, to feel good, to actually like have that like inspiring kind of, I can do this kind of energy, you know? And when we don't have good ojas, when ojas is depleted, it shows up in these things so quickly. That's how we as Vedic doctors be able to monitor people's health and well-being, longevity. So we do ojas checks, and it's so cool because in the world of sexual energy, ojas is so neat to identify in people. So when you look at somebody and you want to think, oh, they just look awesome. They're vital. They're like kind of thriving. What do you see really? You see really bright eyes. You see really a grounded presence, right? They're not darting around. There's not it's like right here, you know? And when you get to that, like juiciness, they're not complaining all the time. So complaints are a really, you know, easy way to spot low ojas. And low ojas is just something, a term we use. There's depletion somewhere. And so we have to look at that. And so when you have people that are just kind of meh, 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 I always, wow, I want to figure out where their ojas is leaving the premises, you know, and how to rebuild that. That's the art of Vedic science, but it's also the ability to manage that yourself. You know, you only get so much ojas. And if you burn it up, you know, the first half of your life, if you're an adrenaline junkie, if you're this and that, you can see the fallout later, you know, if you don't replenish that well. And it doesn't mean you can't go find excitement and do crazy cool stuff. It just means you got to know how to put that back well, or you're going to end up with a long-term depletion. And you see long-term depletion really deeply in nervous system disorders, in sleep. You know, when people look drawn, they're just tissues don't have, you know, tight kind of the collagen world of like, oh yeah, that youthful glow. I mean, glow is kind of a funny word, but it's also very good at looking at ojas of like, what's your spice for life, man? Do you want to be here today? Yeah, that feels good. Like that's ojas, you know, and that's such an important part of our sexual energy is knowing where our ojas lies.
That's so neat. Yeah. Optimize your ojas. Maybe that can be
Optimize
our
your
theme.
ojas. I love
That's right.
it.
It's been amazing talking with you, and I feel like I could keep talking for a long time.
You can do books, right? So yeah, that was a big lesson. I mean, even we just did that. I'm impressed.
Yeah, that was awesome. I want to honor everybody's time and just thank you so much for taking the time to come today and to share with us your
Sure.
experience, your knowledge, and teachings about Ayurveda and how to have a more balanced life. So much useful information in here. And yeah, I just want to share with our listeners that you can find more conversations to thrive in our Thrive school community. I'm going to put it below. Um, and yeah, just thank you. This has been amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting